Good morning. Okay, how you like my new necklace? That's not a new necklace, that's not a fashion statement, whatever it is. That's a mic. Oh, everybody is wondering, why am I wearing a necklace in a service today? Yeah, so I've never seen like this before, so I was wondering whether I could hide it up inside my shirt or not. How are you today? Great? All right, so for those, wow, quite sensitive, huh? Give me a minute. All right, and I really want to thank quite many of you for praying for my mom. All right, she's gone through that operation, and in case some of you may not know, she went for a back operation after months of pain. She's very well now. Operation was on Friday, and Friday about 3 something, she wheeled into the operating theater, and got a lot of feedback, and yeah, so by about 8 something, the doctor haven't messaged us. I was very panicky already. Then finally at 9, he texted me the photo of what they did. And she says he's okay, she's okay. And the next day we went to see her. And she was talking a lot. So that's a very good sign. Praise God for all the prayers. Thank you so much for supporting us in prayer. And she should be discharged by tomorrow or the latest Tuesday. Praise God. Now, how many of you like to eat bland food? No? I'm sure none of you like to eat bland food. Let me tell you a short story. Not a sob story, but a salt, S-A-L-T story. There was once a very rich man, but an old man, and he's very old, and he knows he's going to die soon. But he has 3 daughters, okay, and this is a very rich man. So I think he was going to draw up his will, of course, and see how much to give, or whether he should give to his daughters. So he asked his 3 daughters, say, I want you to show me how much you love me by bringing something to represent your love. So the eldest daughter came and brought him a crown that is full of jewel, and so the old man wore it. It weighed very heavy on his head. He said, wow. And the daughter said, I love you as much as this expensive crown. So, okay, the old man was very happy, and he said, I will give you 1/3 of my wealth. Then the middle daughter came and brought him a opulent fur coat. And she said to him, I love you as my love for you is as rare as this coat. So the old man tried the coat, the fur coat. It was heavy, can feel the warmth. Say, okay, I will give you 1/3 of my wealth. Then came along his youngest daughter. And, youngest daughter usually very loved by father, so this, of course, is his favorite, and he was really in anticipation. He said, this youngest daughter, whom I love so much, will bring me. And so this youngest daughter came and brought him a small paper bag, simple paper bag. Still, he was saying, this must be something that's much more valuable than the other 2. Okay, in great anticipation. So he opened the paper bag and poured out on his palm, and it was fine salt. And the daughter said, Daddy, I love you as much as meat loves salt. But the father was so angry. What? You mean you love me like salt? It's not even worth anything. How can you love me like salt? So he was so angry. He said, get out of my sight. I don't want to see you anymore. I will not give you any more of my wealth. So he was so angry, And so one day he was eating dinner, of course with meat, with steak. He was cutting into it, and when he ate it, it was so bland, Where's salt? Salt. I need salt. And there came along his youngest daughter, and gave him salt. He said, Papa, I love you as meat loves salt. What was the moral of the story? We can't do without salt. Even though we say, you shouldn't be eating too much salt, huh? But still, our body cannot go without salt, right? We need salt. Okay, so thinking that, you think that salt could be very cheap, very insignificant, but the fact is we do need salt. And for that reason, Jesus compares the church as what? Salt, and of course as light, right? Obviously not because that the church is low value and insignificant. Okay? That's why he says the church is like salt of the earth. And that's precisely how essential salt is in the natural world as qualities of the salt. That's why Jesus basically wants us to be salty. We can have the first slide. So, be salty. Or, we are to be a salty church. Cantonese say, ham ham day. Tamil, if I pronounce it correctly, is upu what? Forgot it. Rumba or something like that. No. What is the Tamil in salty? Huh? Upu. That's all. Oh, okay. You have to be salty church. And you know what? I just found out, of course, what does it mean to really be salty or be a salty church? But let me tell you, a salty church is basically about influence. The previous slide, right? Influence. Okay? Now, I found out that in the United States, there's actually a church named as Salty Church. Really? Really? You go and Google it and you see a salty church, or the salty church, rather. And there's really such a name. Imagine we change our name to Salty Church of Kajang. But I really like the purpose, of this salty church. So it's up there. It says, live salty. It's more than church, it's just a catchphrase. It is our identity. Why? Because salt changes things, right? Remember I'm talking about influence, right? It also changes things. Our goal in life is not to judge from the sidelines. Now, I really like this a lot, okay? Our goal in life is not to judge from the sidelines. Judge this, judge that, putting, judgment on things here and there. But our purpose is to jump in, actively participating in God's plan to bring hope to the world. Actively participating. And our people value relationships over rules and truth over tradition. Our heart is for the hurting and the lost. And our mission is to rescue and empower people for Jesus. How about that? Live salty. This is really what it means to be salty. All this influence, all this, reaching out and to rescue, to empower the hurting and the lost. So this is their purpose in life. And therefore, Matthew chapter 5 verse 13 tell us what? You are the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the earth. Jesus is using salt as an analogy for all of us as believers. Now, in the Roman times, have you come across this phrase that you are worth the salt? Yeah? Have you come across this phrase? That means what? If you think that salt is cheap, cannot be like you're worth, compared to salt, you're cheap. No. Obviously, in those times, salt is very of great value. Okay, people get paid in salt. Then it has been estimated that there are about 14,000 users, modern day users for salt. So don't think that it's just for you to season your food. There's no many other, value for users for salt. So salt obviously is not cheap and insignificant after all, right? Because salt also changes everything that it comes into contact with. And that is a phrase that goes like this, You remember, the salt shaker? You put salt and then you shake. It says that salt left in the salt shaker is just decoration. What should it be? A salty church is us as a people living out our purpose. Now, everyone, do you have a pulse? Yeah? If you have a pulse, you have a purpose in life. Right? Yeah. If you say you don't have a purpose, you don't have a pulse anymore. So if you have a pulse, you have a purpose in life. And therefore, the thing is, as a salt, like a salt shaker, salt remaining in the salt shaker is just decoration. Therefore, for the salt shaker to be useful, it got to be poured out, shaken out, right? Otherwise, how are you going to season your meat with the salt? Okay, so therefore, we have to be poured out people making a difference in our world. Don't be a salt inside the salt shaker, but be a salt inside the salt shaker shaken out. What, like a tongue twister like that. Right? And so salty church is us living out our purpose. That's why Jeremiah 29 verse 11 tells us what? God has a plan for all of us. And as a people, we are at our best when we are living out God's calling in our lives. So therefore today, you came in not with some drugs or what in a small packet. Everybody got this? So what are you saying here? Are you salty? And I want to thank Bell for taking a few days just to pack 350 packets of this. Are you salty? After this church, you can go and have your lunch. If you think the food is not salty enough, you can use it a bit because it has been anointed, When you take it, you'll become very salty, okay? Or you can put it, somewhere in your house to remind you, are you salty? And, today I'm going to begin a new series that's really in line with what our theme is, Love God, Love People. And I'm going to narrow in about loving people, loving people. And the series is called The Church That Loves. The Church That Loves. And I'm going to kick off this series by introducing to you how important it is for us to be a church that loves, that we got to be a salty church. After this, I want you all to basically tell us, hey, our church is a really salty church. So, the salty church. Why the salty church? I believe Christians are to be salty, and salty Christians make a salty church. And a salty church influences and loves people. Discipleship is all about being salty. Yeah? Discipleship is all about being salty. Being the disciple making disciples. To see lives transformed, change, restore, renewed. Because we are the salt of the earth. Jesus says, you are to be the salt of the earth. And of course, the second part of the way is light of the world, right? But I'm going to, as I said, I will just narrow down on salt, okay? So remember this salt packet. You want to use it, can. Once you finish it, you want to fill it again, tell me, I will fill it for you. I'll pray over it, and fill it for you. But let's look into detail into the scripture verse, biblical text. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. Let's turn to Matthew 5, verse 13. It's up on the slide as well. It says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." Very simple verse. Jesus said that you are the salt of the earth. And a few things we can actually gather what Jesus is saying from this verse about salt. All right, let's have a lesson about salt. What is the chemical name for salt? Sodium chloride. Okay, very good. You have not lost your science. Sodium chloride. So what Jesus said about sodium chloride? First of all, there are salt on the earth. That's a no-brainer, right? There are salt on the earth, obviously. Secondly, God's people are likened to salt on the earth. Okay? Simple enough. Thirdly, salt can lose its saltiness. Get it? Fourth, once salt loses its saltiness, it cannot be salted again. Okay, this is according to the verse. Number 5, once salt loses its saltiness, it is useless and worthless. Number 6, it's not that, okay? Useless and worthless salt are discarded, thrown out. Simple enough. Just from this verse, we gather all this about salt, what Jesus said about salt. But here is the point. What does Jesus want us to know about salt? First thing, we are salt of the earth. We are the salt of the earth. As I said, salt has many beneficial uses, right? Salt is essential to life. You cannot survive without salt. You cannot survive without salt. Your body needs salt. But salt is more than just a spice for seasoning. It's an essential preservative. Okay? That before they have refrigeration, they use salt to cure their meat, to preserve their meat. Okay, so preservative. So you won't eat all the so that people can eat all this unspoiled food. It's also a means of commerce those days, where they will basically barter trade in salt. Now, when it comes to bringing this into the illustration that Jesus gave, it's a very powerful illustration. It's basically Jesus saying to us, what good would a disciple be if he does not live as he was called to be? Basically, we are called to be salt of the earth. And therefore, he's telling us, if we don't live to be salt of the earth, we end up to be worthless salt, and it's been thrown out. So if we don't live as salt, what good would it be to be called a disciple of Christ? One day someone just sent a link about one of our new minister. Her name is Yo Be In. Yeah? And she's a Christian. Okay, Christian. And I want to read to you some parts about her testimony or something like that. Now, at 18 years old, 18 years, she had this urgency to pray for Malaysia in a 40-day fast and prayer for Malaysia, helped by NECF. We also have this, right? I mean, we also encourage you all to do so. But little did she know, a decade after she made the prayer, she became part of the answer to the prayer that she made. God changed her heart. after she began praying for Malaysia. She began to feel love for Malaysia and felt that this was a country that God really placed her in. And she said this, "So the lesson I learned is that prayer changes heart. A lot of people pray to change God's hand, but God changed my heart through prayer." That's why I really encourage you to join us for intercession nights. In the beginning of the year, when we begin to week after week, pray, and day after day, we had this 10-day and all that to pray for our nation's election. And what happened to our nation is really a result of prayer, because you prayed. You had a hand in what happened to Malaysia. And so I really strongly encourage you, come to pray together, because the nation still need the prayer. So starting with only 20 people in the church ministry in University Technology Petronas, I think, she began to lead prayer meetings where she would, quote-unquote, force the increasing number of students who joined to pray for the nation. "I believe the formation of everything is built on prayer," she said. Unfortunately, she was passed over for Cambridge, all right, even though she obtained a GPA of 3.95 out of 4. At the time, that really speaks about fairness in this country. But God was good to her, because when one door closes, he opens another. And so an American company offered her a job that was so lucrative that she could pay off her 10 years bond in just a few months. Wow. But in 2008, she recalled reading about the political climate changing in Malaysia. And she realized that she still loved Malaysia, but all this was buried under a burden of frustration. She was very frustrated. But when she began to unveil all this, remove all this frustration, she still sensed that love for Malaysia. And so she quit her job, came back to Malaysia, but she said, "I still wanted to go to Cambridge and pray to God to fulfill my ambition." And she applied then to Cambridge, and not only God fulfilled her ambition, the Lord gave her a double portion. She was awarded the prestigious Bill and Melinda Scholarship. I think it's Bill Gates Scholarship, right? Which was limited to only 50 non-UK students. She got it. She said this, "If you walk in God's will and pray, He will do exceedingly abundantly. Time may delay the dream or desire in our hearts, but if it is God's will, He will give it to us at the right time in the right way." That's what she said. And so after completing her master's in Cambridge, she's really struggled whether to stay back in UK for the bright future or returning to Malaysia. I told God, "Look, I can't do anything to change this nation. Why do you want me to come back?" Yet she returned after much prayer. Soon she found herself, by divine direction, joining DAP, but she felt inadequate. I felt very small, and I prayed to God, asking Him how He can use me. I'm so small. But a sister in Christ shared with me about giving my 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread. God was telling me that I don't need a lot, but my 2 fishes and 5 loaves will be enough to make a change, because He would multiply them for me. I was reminded again that if I can give a little of my flour and oil, God will do His part and send His rain of righteousness. And of course, the rest is history. She won the state seat of Damansara Utama, or not state seat, I think parliamentary seat. State. Oh, now Bakri. Yeah. That time, due by a huge margin that time. So everything, she said this, everything will fall into place in the right timing. We just need to pray, work hard, and wait patiently for His sovereign will to be done in this nation. And now, of course, she's a minister. Why am I reading to you this story? We have many Malaysians, Christians. They actually have returned to Malaysia. They knew that God has called them to be salt of the Malaysian earth. Coming back to influence, to be God's instrument to change. And they know that God can use them. And I also know about, of course, Hannah Yo. Bright future they could have in whatever countries overseas, but they chose to come back to be salt of this earth. I also saw a video about a homeless man. That was in America. He's a war veteran, but he found himself homeless, begging for food in the streets. So one man's walking past, right? There was a stranger walking past, and that man dropped his wallet onto the street. But this homeless man picked up the wallet, chased after him and said, "Hey, sir, this is your wallet." And the man was so touched by it, he said, "I got to give you something." And I was talking to him, he's homeless, he's an army veteran and all that kind of thing. So gave him the money. And guess what he did with the money? Of course, he went to buy food. So he went to buy food, and he bought a lot of packets of food. Guess what he did? He went off and gave food to all the other homeless people. Now, let me tell you, that is being salty. Seeing the need, he has his own need, but he saw other people's needs. He can see others' needs beyond his own needs. That's being salty. Note that the scriptures does not say become salt, but the scripture says what? You are salt. You don't have to become salt, but you are salt. You're already salt. The moment you accepted Christ, God has made you to be salt. There's no process to become salt, because you are already salt. So we are already the salt of the earth, and we got to be salt of the earth in our family, in our community, in our church, and also in our work, in our school, everywhere that we are in. And so in these 4 areas, as the salt of the earth, we have to do the following. First of all, preserve. What is there to be preserved? We have to preserve whatever we come into contact with, who we come into contact with. Your community, your neighborhood, your workplace, your business, your students, your school, your colleges, anyone, even in church. We are to be salt. We are to preserve whatever we come into contact with. What do you mean by preserve? Whatever is rotting, is going to rot, you stop it from rotting. It's just like, the nation is so corrupt. What are Christians doing to stop the corruption? Are we adding on to the corruption, or are we stopping the corruption? That's been salt. Preserve. Stop it from rotting or rotting further. We have to preserve not only our own faith, but also the faith of others. Are we stumbling others? Or are we actually preserving others' faith by our lifestyle, by what we say, what we do as Christians, as a church? Work towards healing, preserving the good in the culture, in whatever situations. Christians are to be a kind of a moral antibiotic. That's an interesting word, right? What does antibiotic do? Kill the germs, right? Something like that. Kill the germs So are we killing the germs in our church, in our community, in our workplace, in our schools, in wherever we are in? Or are we the germs? Yucks. Oops. So let me challenge you to be like salt to preserve. Secondly, purify. Salt is also used as a cleansing agent. Like, you know the phrase that say, rubbing salt into wound? Yucks. It means what? Wound is already painful, but you rub salt to it, wow, add on to that one. But I think there's a purpose for salt in the wound. What does it do? It actually also can, anybody who go to science, biology, or what? It can also kind of like disinfect or something like that, right? Antiseptic, even though it's painful, but so salt purifies. You know, it can cleanse it. So just as we are being purified through Jesus Christ, we must live as purified, as being purified. So we have to seek to bring purity to society as salt. Purify others with in their walk with God by our encouragement, by our motivation, you know, by our involvement and by our teaching of the Word of God. We are to purify the society around us with our godly values. Do you have godly values? As salt of the earth, you are supposed to have godly values. And you're supposed to use these godly values to purify whatever worldly values that's in the community that's around you. But the challenge is, are we as salt doing that? Salty church. Salty Christians. Number 3, flavors. As salt of the earth, flavors. Add flavor. Just like you don't like to eat bland food. Okay? When I had chicken pox at the age of 18, you know, when you're having chicken pox, everything must be bland. I'm not blended, bland. Very clear food. So I remember every day for the 5-6 days, I only eat plain porridge. Nothing else in the porridge. I don't know why my mom gave me only that. But after a while, she gave me those pickled lettuce can. It must be because of that I ended up loving pickled lettuce so much for the rest of my life. Only that, really. But nobody likes to eat bland food. Okay, it's just so tasteless. You know, my mom, she was so afraid of her, blood pressure and all that kind of thing. So if she cooks, everything is bland. So, I say, okay, Mom, I think you have cooked many, many years already. Time for you to have a rest, so I can take over. Nice way of saying it, But salt, adds flavor to your food. Imagine if you just have to add a bit of salt into it and the food all tastes so nice after that. It enhances flavors. Now, Christianity is not dull and boring. Is it? No, right? It's not, right? It's not dull and boring. So Christians are to add flavor to people. Can you imagine? We end up actually causing everything to be more bland. We are to have flavor. Don't be so dull that others, when they see you, they think, what do I want to be what you have, What would I want? It doesn't make sense. Let me share this. I think Stephen has shared this before, but let me just, again, bring it up. There's this man by the name of Lau. Shared that before. Went to Sakinjang trip. Yeah. Every morning after the Chinese service, he come and take my hand, greet. I'm really very, very so touched. I remember the first time I met him was with a cell group that went to Petaling Street. Okay, at that time, so quiet. Doesn't really mix around. I tried to mix around, but he's only Chinese speaking. That was the first trip. Second trip joined us was for Sekinjang. Again, very quiet. Not really, because of course at that time there's some Chinese section people that joined. And the next thing that I knew was that he told Stephen, I see your people means church people, full of happiness and joy, and Now we didn't intentionally pretend to be happy in front of him, right? But it flows out, being together and laughing and really enjoying one another's company. And he was very touched. And he said this, I don't have that kind of happiness. I want that kind of happiness. And since then, he has accepted Christ and has been coming to the Chinese service regularly, Another testimony was my neighbor. His name is Yap. Wife died, and I said, I got to, pay for him to come for the Sekinjang trip. He came. He joined us, and before I knew it, so he accepted Christ. And every Sunday he has been coming to our Chinese service. But the thing is, it's about they sing. Christians, the church, the way we bring ourselves, the way what God is putting in our lives and flowing out of that. And so you are being salt when people see the difference in you. Flavor. We should exemplify a lifestyle that is full of flavor. Give the world flavor. And imagine what you can do as a salty church. Number 4, influences. Just as salt changes everything it comes into contact with, our role in the world is to be an influencer in the world. We are not to hide our church. Last time I used to ask the youth, when I was handling the youth, when you go to your school during canteen time, do you say grace? It's a challenge then say, don't be afraid to say grace in front of your friends. Don't hide your Christianity. What's there to hide? You got to be the influencer, not being influenced. We have to be an influencer in the world without being influenced negatively by the corruption ourselves. Don't be part of the problem, but be part of where to solve the problem. Just as salt is not just a seasoning, we are not just to be sitting in our pews, with all the correct doctrines that we have and not do anything about it. As salt is needed and put to use, so we are to be put to use. We are to be shaken out of the salt shaker in order for the salt to be useful, right? So we are the salt of the earth. 4 things: preserves, purify. What's the third one? Flavors. And the 4th one? Influences, right? So we are the salt of the earth. Now we know that. Now the second thing that basically Jesus is saying to us also, that as salt of the earth, we can also lose our saltiness. He warns us. But if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? That means there is a possibility for salt to lose its saltiness. If not, Jesus won't be saying that. So 2 things stands out. Salt can lose its saltiness, and therefore that means that you and I, as salt of the earth, can also lose our saltiness. Don't think that you can be salty forever without doing anything. So the salted salt cannot be made salty again. How can that happen? All right, I'm not a chemist, but I know that sodium chloride actually is very stable chemical. But It can become contaminated when you mix it with impurities. That's where it will lose its saltiness. So Jesus knows that. He's a chemist. He knows about that. Okay? And so therefore, how can we lose our saltiness? Number one, when we are contaminated by sin. Impurities. Number two, when the distinction between Christians and the world are not preserved. When you and I are no different from the world. How can it influence? How can it purify? How can it flavors? How can it preserves? And number three, when we as a salty church loses our testimony. There's another portion of scripture in Mark chapter 9, verse 50. Now this is a very interesting verse. Actually, somebody said this verse is the hardest verse in the Bible to interpret. Mark chapter 9, verse 50. I'm not going to go through all that, because I don't have the time for that. But it says in Mark 9:50, it's not there on the screen. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? And it goes on to say, have salt among yourselves. That's my inspiration for giving you salt today. Have salt among yourselves. I'm given you salt among you today. Why? And be at peace with each other. Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. That means as salt, together we have to have that peace. When that peace is no longer there, when there are conflicts, there are infighting and all that, we lose our testimony. And when that happens, that means there's no longer any salt among yourselves. And we will have conflicts like a family. Every family will have a conflict. But 99% or maybe 90% of families, once they have conflict, they don't disintegrate. They know a way to patch back and still stays as a family. If we do not know how to do that, what's the difference with the world when there's no love? So salt can lose its saltiness for that reason. And so what happened to us when we are no longer salty? The verse goes on to say this: it's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Now, to help you understand why Jesus said that salt that has lost its saltiness is thrown out and trampled underfoot, we have to go back to Jesus' days. In the first century, when salt has become tasteless, they use whatever reasons, somebody to bake or whatever it is, so it loses its saltiness because it mixes in, whatever impurities. It's basically taken out and thrown onto the ground outside. And when you do that, the more that has been done, people will just walk on those places, and when the more you walk, the more it's hardened in. And so it becomes a walkway, and those days, if there's any winter or whatever it is, the salt actually, so-called, will melt away the snow, so it doesn't become slippery. So it still have some use. But basically, the thing is, it's been thrown out. It's no longer used for preserving, for purifying, for adding flavor. It's just being used to be trampled on. That's all. So same way, the metaphor basically tells us this. When we lose our saltiness, we become tasteless disciples. Tasteless. No more taste. But it doesn't mean that you lose your salvation. Okay? It doesn't mean that you lose your salvation. But basically it means that you'll be cast aside in the ministry of Christ. Simply put, is that God cannot use you. Tasteless disciples are not fulfilling the purpose for which God or Jesus have called them, because they have lost their testimony, they have lost their influence. And the consequences of such failure is the loss of present usefulness and future rewards in heaven. And the warning of 5:13 also is relevant to our church. Since Jesus is talking about disciples as a group, and we are later called, to be the foundation of the church, this is applicable to every local church. So as a corporate church, as a church as a whole, if we become tasteless, we'll be snuffed out of our existence. That is like what you see in many countries when the church becomes useless, And so, less and less people are coming into the church, and then the church becomes a monument, becomes used as a museum or a pub or whatever, or taken over by other faith, So that's where this is found in history. For the church becomes tasteless, becomes unsalty. So the whole point, the thing is, now be careful that even if it seems we are flourishing today, we can be tasteless tomorrow. All right? And the church of today says, this is what they said. The church of today has a tendency to brag about the size of our salt shakers, our church building, or the amount of salt that we are putting into our shakers, our worship attendance, rather than truly salting down our communities with the good news and good works of Jesus Christ. Oh, how big is our building? Or how big is our congregation? But are we salting our communities and bringing in souls into the salt shaker? The whole point of salt is to leave the shaker and hit the meat. Otherwise, you are just decoration. We must therefore impact our world with the life of Christ. Give the world a taste. I think it's found in Psalms, right? Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. When we are tasteless, how can people taste Jesus? That the Lord is good? So you are the salt of the earth. And so for the coming weeks, we have to ask ourselves, what are we as Christians, as a church? Are we salty Christians? Are we a salty church? Remember, the scriptures never say become salt, but rather you are salt. And so in the next 2 months, we are going to talk about being salt and how we can be salt of the earth. Comes down to loving people as Jesus loved. We're going to talk about how, as a salty church, we will be an accepting church. We also will be a gracious church. Church that extends grace. Church that accepts, bring people into acceptance. We're going to be a caring church. What do it mean to be a caring church? Not just caring for people in our own midst, but caring for people out there. Some of you will have to know about this guy by the name of Ayman. He is actually a male nurse that was taking care of Pasaniki in Sunway Hospital. Okay, now I can tell you that he's out of Sunway Hospital already. Okay, he's in another hospital. But when he was in Sunway Hospital, this male nurse actually has just started work with 18 days ago. Then he had met an accident, hit and run. That kind of like probably hit his neck, and so the lower part, he cannot move. And so So he was in Sunway. So he was being treated at Sunway. Then because it costs a lot, the family cannot afford. So by divine arrangement, he found himself in Putrajaya Hospital. And by divine arrangement, I met my mother in Putrajaya Hospital. And by divine arrangement, he found himself in the same ward as my mother. And by divine arrangement, he also has the same doctor as my mother's doctor. And so yesterday, actually the day before, I went to see him, but the family were all there. And yesterday, May and I went to see him again, and to encourage him. And I said, "Can I pray for you?" He said, "Yes." So the mother was there. So of course I asked permission from the mother. And I "Can I pray for you?" So I laid my hands on his head and prayed over him for God's healing. Then we found out that the mother was there, and she basically has been sleeping on the floor, taking care of him. And by the way, arrangement, I also found out that they are from Kelantan, my home state. So she's been sleeping on the floor. I said, Then we said, actually, you can go and get a lazy chair for you to sleep. She didn't even know that. And the nurse, so somehow strange, I never tell her about that. For the last 3 days, it seems she has been sleeping on the floor. If she don't sleep on the floor, she basically put 2 chairs and sleep there. Can you imagine the size of 2 chairs? And so we went, and May went to help her to get a lazy chair, so that she'll be able to sleep at least more comfortably and all that. I'm not saying that we have to bring attention to what we are doing, but what I'm saying is that take opportunities to see needs and be there, to meet those needs. And of course, they are Muslims, but they were very touched. That not only we are non-Malays, but we're also non-Muslims, but we are showing concern. And I also found in the same room that my mother was in, there's also an old lady that was admitted, 88 years old, pain, she couldn't walk, and found out that she was San Tok Singh's mother-in-law. And yesterday I met San Tok Singh. Huh? You know who is San Tok Singh, right? Huh? You don't know who is San Tok Singh, Mokhtar Dahari, So Ching An? Don't know, Ayya, you're not Malaysian, Yeah. And so we took really the trouble to really spoke to the family, and extend help, whatever, and my daughter, our second daughter, spent the night yesterday with my mom in the hospital. So we told the family, say, if your mom needs any help, ask her to call up to my daughter, so she will be there to help. Then last night, she was crying out in pain, don't know what, headache. So my daughter texted us, so she went to help her, massage her head a bit, So all that. I think there's some small ways that we can actually, see the need and just go out and help something. No big deal, no big thing, but I'm sure we can do it, when we open our eyes and say, hey, we are salt of the earth. What can we do to be salty? So ask yourself, are you salty? Are you salty? We are to be salty. Don't lose your saltiness. All right, so this is what I'm going to do. Everybody has this packet? Yes? I want you to go to someone, all right? If someone don't have the salt, say, okay, I want to go get a packet of salt and make you salty. And I want you to, it can be a lady, you don't have to be husband and wife, okay? We're going to close with just together as a church, be salty. So let's pray for one another. Can we? Short prayer just with one another, one-to-one, and begin to share. Okay, let's remind ourselves, are you salty? Can we be salty? And so let's be salty, I then pray that God will open. Okay, anybody needs salt? You can put up your hand, the ushers will come. If you don't have a salt, okay, put up your hand high so that the ushers will know. Yeah. So, nicely packaged. Don't waste Belle's efforts, Don't go lunch and then pour out all the salt and after. Yeah. Right? Keep it at home, throw it somewhere, Wow, midnight, some more Joyous and Elsa. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Really appreciate that. So, store it somewhere, put it in, somewhere that you can see it, and it reminds you, are you salty? Ask God, hey, every day can I be salty for someone? Let's be a salty church. Okay? So why don't you just go and then with someone, and pray, that God will open up opportunities for you to be salty. All right? Small ways. Go reach out to oil courses and all that. All right? Can I have the worship team to step up as well?